Hi everyone, welcome to Communication and Conflict, promoting mindful communication, growth through conflict. And this is also a podcast on anchor.fm under the heading Chaos, CAOS. So it's the 1st of January 2020, so Happy New Year to anybody watching who is watching this soon after this is published. It's also a new decade. It's a new year that follows what has been a very tumultuous, I suppose, is a word that could describe it. 3 or 4 years in the UK, where we've been debating about whether to leave the EU, and that's caused a lot of division in the UK over whether we should actually leave or whether we shouldn't after the referendum in 2016. Gosh, yes, it was that long ago. So there's been 3 or 4 years of divisive discussions, I suppose you could call it, and it's led to a lot of division amongst people. I don't personally see it as being that terrible on the ground, but certainly if you looked at social media and the mainstream media itself, you could believe that everybody was trying to strangle each other. But nevertheless, it has led to a lot of division and different views about things. And there's a lot of call for reparation and reconciliation in the UK going into the new year. The new Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, and one or two of the religious leaders have called for that kind of thing. It's the kind of thing that actually sometimes gets called for at the start of most New Years, so I'm not sure if it is just one of these things that gets said at the start of the year and then everybody forgets about it as the year progresses, or whether there is a genuine kind of wish to do something active about it. So what I've been thinking this morning, and which has kind of come to me as a, a thought for how we can go into 2020, because of all this kind of division that's happened over the last 2 or 3 years, is perhaps an exploration of what we actually understand conflict to be and how we feel about conflict. I work as a mediator and conflict coach, as most of you watching will know. And for me, conflict is something which is inevitable. It's always going to happen. I also see it as an opportunity, rather than perhaps negatively as it's often portrayed or interpreted or seen, because I see the negative aspects that are associated with conflict as being how people respond to conflict. As I say, conflict's inevitable. It's always going to happen. So what matters is, how do we deal with conflict when it arises? And actually, most of us are very good at responding to conflict effectively anyway. We're so good we don't even really notice how quickly we resolve conflict on a daily basis. But when we haven't managed to resolve a conflict with someone else, and it gets stuck, that's where things can become very stressful and difficult, and where processes like mediation and conflict coaching come in to try to help people to return to that kind of creative process, which is the resolution of conflict. So I want to kind of look at what the possibilities are for seeing conflict more constructively, more creatively. So the idea of conflict being an opportunity for creativity. Creativity from conflict is how I'm titling the video. And I want to just go through a few kind of thoughts about how we can come to terms with conflict a little bit more, to be more at ease with conflict, to be more accepting of its inevitability, to be accepting that it's always going to happen. So if we can come to that acceptance, can we kind of perhaps take a little bit of space for ourselves when we're involved in a conflict that doesn't seem to be getting resolved, to help ourselves to just kind of step back and think, okay, how am I gonna deal with this in a way which is more constructive than getting involved in a fight, or perhaps alternatively thinking that I've now got to avoid someone or avoid a certain place or situation because it's so stressful for me. So I want to just look at the possibilities for, first of all, creativity from conflict, how we can make peace with conflict as an idea, how we can come to an acceptance of conflict's inevitability, um, how we can learn from conflicts, how we can empower ourselves when we're in conflict, what the opportunities are for self-empowerment, and also to see, as I said, conflict as an opportunity. So that we're starting to kind of consider some more positive aspects of what conflict provides for ourselves. So first of all, making peace with conflict. So what do I mean by that? I mean um, the sense that conflict is always going to happen. So if we live in fear of conflict, it means that we're often going to react defensively straight away whenever a conflict arises, and that in itself, as Byron Katie once said, one of her famous quotes is that defense is the first act of war. That quite often when we experience something that we feel we need to defend against, uh, the way that we defend against it can often be in itself quite attacking. So if someone says to me, Alan, you haven't done that very well, whatever it is, whether it's a job that I've been doing, or whether it's something I've created, or whether it's how I've dressed myself, or whatever, in some way they're saying, Alan, you haven't done that very well. If my first reaction is to say, who are you to say that to me? And, well, I couldn't because, etc. And I've got reasons why um, I might not want to acknowledge that I haven't done something as well as I'd like, but I don't like to have it pointed out. Um, there's a risk that I actually become quite attacking in myself. Whereas if I can come to a thought that, well, okay, this person's got that opinion, I might share it, I might not share it. If I don't share it, I can look at, I wonder why they see it that way. And if I do share it, really, what would I defend against? But actually, often we defend against things that we already believe ourselves because we don't like other people to point it out to us. And of course, it's not to say they should point it out to us, but can we acknowledge that quite often our defensiveness is because we're already ourselves feeling a little bit self-critical about things, and all that person's done is, in a sense, said the very thing that's already in our heads already. Um, so if we can make peace with conflict, if we can come to an acceptance that it's always going to happen, can we have a few seconds before we react to someone's criticism to just think, well, what do I think about that criticism? They've got that view. Maybe from where they're standing, it does look like that. Doesn't mean to say I've got to agree with them, but I can listen to them. I can acknowledge that that's their view. And if I feel I need to, I can challenge them in return. By not immediately reacting and attacking someone, it doesn't mean to say that we're accepting their point of view. It doesn't mean to say we're caving in. But it does mean that we're giving ourselves some time to reflect on what we want to say in response, rather than simply react with an attack in response. Sometimes we might hear criticism in something someone said when actually that wasn't their intention in the first place. So again, by taking some time, by making peace with our sense of conflict about something, by taking time and having an acceptance of its presence, it means we can be more constructive and measured in our response anyway. And as I say, it doesn't mean to say we've got to agree with what the person said. It doesn't mean to say we've got to let it pass without response. But is that response immediately an attacking response because we're feeling under attack ourselves? So if we can feel a kind of sense of peace with conflict, we can have that more measured kind of consideration of what someone says before we respond to them. Can we learn from conflict? Can we look at, well, if someone says something or does something, or we disagree with someone else's point of view, again, do we have to immediately dismiss their point of view, or can we actually look at that there might be a different perspective on this? And by hearing different perspectives on things, it always allows for more creativity, because we're able to see how others see things from a different perspective, from a different angle. And in many ways, this is why when we have fixed views about things, if I say um, I guess in a sense, I could even go to things like the Brexit Remain debate. If I say I'm a leaver, then that suggests I've got one fixed perspective on things, and that the only direct opposite view on things is a Remainer, as if we're just kind of literally, one's coming from this direction and one's coming from this direction. But actually, for both, there will be angles from all round looking in on that idea. And that can be true about anything. It can be true about a work project. I might be looking at it from the perspective of the the person who's designing ideas for it. Another person may be looking at it from the point of view of the cost of it. Another person might be looking at it from the point of view of the actual physical carrying out of it. So we're all looking at a different, looking at the same thing from a different perspective. But if I expect, maybe as the designer of the project, that everybody should agree with me, I'm not going to learn anything. I'm just going to be in battle with them all the time. If I'm not hearing their perspective, then I'm not optimizing how that project can go forward. But the risk is it becomes my way or the highway, in which case then the people who have a different view to me are simply likely to undermine my intention, because they don't feel listened to my perspective. So what can I learn from conflict? What can I learn from hearing that others have a different perspective on things? Or even if I don't get to hear it, which is sometimes the case, what can I learn from the fact that people are not agreeing with my perspective, even if I don't hear why they're disagreeing with my perspective? What can I do that means that I can still try to proceed with things in a way which accommodates that people aren't necessarily aligning with my view, but in a way that means I'm not constantly in battle with them, but I'm promoting development of my idea going forward without having to be in battle. These are all opportunities for learning in conflict, rather than simply it becoming a war in one way or another with another person. Self-empowerment in conflict. One of the things that often happens when people are stuck in conflict is they feel powerless. And in mediation and conflict coaching, one of the things that almost always is at root of the resolution of the difficulty is that people start to recognize that they've had power that they haven't acknowledged to themselves, in decisions that they've made, in kind of actions that they might have taken, but they've told themselves they couldn't do those things. And so when I talk about power, I don't mean power over another person. I mean self-power. I mean the power that I have to make a decision that perhaps I thought previously I couldn't make, or the power I have to choose a certain action that perhaps previously I thought I couldn't carry out. And it's interesting how often an individual's choice about how they act in a way that previously they thought they couldn't can be the unlocking of a difficult situation. And it's also interestingly why conflict coaching as a one-to-one process can be so powerful in helping resolution of conflict, because it means we're not making ourselves dependent on another person to change before our problem can be resolved. We see that we have capacities to make changes and take actions and make decisions for ourselves that don't rely on other people changing, and that can still respect their perspective. It's really quite interesting how often conflict is seen as needing both people to agree and both people to come to an acceptance of each other. But actually, very often, it's that people have disempowered themselves through the beliefs they hold about their situation or about the other person. So self-empowerment in conflict is a great opportunity that can arise in conflict situations. When people see that, they're then able to see that they can self-empower themselves in many other situations that previously they thought they were powerless in. And conflict as an opportunity, there's a lot I could say on this. I've written articles on this. I'll probably put a link to one or two in the information section below. But for me, conflict is resolved through taking it or using it as an opportunity for what I call learning, connection, and insight. And again, as I say, I'll put links to a more expansive kind of exploration of those three things below. But learning, what I mean by learning, connection, and insight are, well, learning is where we just do something differently. That means the problem is resolved. So, a simple example I sometimes give is if I'm disturbing my neighbour by doing my washing at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night, and they tell me it's disturbing them, well, I can resolve it by doing it on a Wednesday at 7 o'clock, perhaps, when they're not going to be disturbed by it. So I've just done something differently. That's all I've needed to do to resolve the conflict. Connection is where I'm willing to hear another person's point of view, but I don't feel I have to agree with it. Quite often people won't listen to other people's points of views because they think that by listening to it, it means they're looking like they're agreeing with it. And that's quite an unfortunate kind of perspective to have, that by listening to somebody else's point of view, we think it looks like we're agreeing with it. And so what we tend to do is just dismiss other points of view before we've even heard it. And we find reasons to justify dismissing it, when actually we can hear someone's point of view without any sense that we've got to agree with it whatsoever, but at least we've listened to it. And by doing so, it means we learn something that can help us with the fact that we've got the conflict with the other person. But if we don't listen to it, we remain stuck, and they therefore also feel very aggrieved at us because we're not willing to listen to them. So there's an opportunity for connection in conflict, and insight is an opportunity to learn something about ourselves. Why is it when this person does what they do, I feel uncomfortable in some way, that I feel anxious, or I feel frightened, or I feel intimidated, or I feel angry to the point maybe of being aggressive? What can I learn about myself, and what can I do to support myself given that I feel that way? So again, these are all opportunities that exist within conflict arising, and therefore they're useful. They're really useful experiences to have. But so often we can get stuck in this need to attack in response to what we think is an attack, or to avoid and then kind of hide ourselves away, and then perhaps resent both ourselves and the other person for feeling we had to do that, when actually we probably didn't. We just perhaps didn't at the time feel able to respond constructively to the difficult situation, and that's fine, as long as we don't persistently hide ourselves away from the situation, that we actually do start learning how to create a way of returning to the situation but feeling more kind of comfortable with ourselves. So I just want to leave you with a couple of questions with regard to when responding to a conflict, because I suppose these are questions that I'm wondering as well when I see people have these kind of wars on social media. Someone says something and someone else might immediately jump on the fact that they've said it and said, you're an idiot, you're only saying that because this, that, or the other. And I kind of think, so I wonder what their intention was in doing that. So the two questions are, when responding to a conflict, what is your purpose in responding? What is it you're wanting to respond for? Why do you want to respond to the difficult thing that's said or the difficult action. Why do you want to? And when I say why, I don't mean that you shouldn't. I mean, what is your purpose? What do you want to happen as a result of your response to a conflict situation? Um, and just that. What is your purpose in responding? What is your reason for responding to what someone said or done? And what do you foresee as the possible consequence of your responding in that way? What is it you want the consequence to be of responding in that way? What do you want to happen as an outcome of it? I suppose these questions arise for me because if I see these kind of interactions on social media, but it doesn't have to be on social media, it can be in any context. If I see someone say something or do something and another person says, taking the Twitter examples, for example, you're an idiot, you're only saying that because, as I say, I immediately wonder, I wonder why, what the purpose is of saying that to the person. What is it the person's wanting? And as I say, I really want to emphasize, I'm genuinely curious. I'm not wanting to dismiss it. I'm not saying they're being stupid. I'm not saying they're wrong to do it. I'm genuinely interested in what leads someone to do that, and what then happens as a consequence for them. And as I say, I really want to emphasize, I'm not judging people for doing that. I'm just interested that it's such a common thing to happen on social media. And as I say, the risk is that we can see that happening and people say, oh, they just want to fight and they just want, this. But for me, that's then dismissing them. That's being dismissive towards them. It is not connection that I was talking about earlier. It's saying, I don't care why they do that. They're just stupid. In which case, in a sense, we're just doing the same thing that they're doing. So I am genuinely interested in what it is that leads people to respond in that kind of in that way. I don't want to give it a label because again it will sound like I'm judging it, but in that way of saying, this person said that, you're an idiot for saying that, or you're stupid, or you're whatever other label there is for the person. And then kind of giving a kind of a counter view, which is kind of perhaps critical as well. I'm just interested in what it is people see as the follow-on, the consequence, what it is they're wanting, what is their purpose in doing that. Just out of curiosity. As I say, I'm not judging people, I'm just interested in what leads to conflict developing in that way. So if you want to kind of join me on this kind of journey of exploration, please share this with other people. Please respond to what I've said, because I just think it's interesting to explore what it is that leads to conflict and how it is we respond to conflict. And I think going into 2020, given what's happened over the past few years, it's just interesting to start to open up about what is conflict, why do we respond as we do, what do we want when we do respond in certain ways, to what extent does that work for us, etc. So please share this, please respond, please like it if you like it, please subscribe if you want to be notified of future videos on similar themes, and have a happy new year if I haven't said that already. If you're listening at a time which isn't at the new year, then have a happy day, and I look forward to seeing you soon, and thanks for listening. Bye bye.